A lot of small assumptions, too. As you know, the thesis of the show, small assumptions allow big lies. A lot of small assumptions are being spoken today that just because military intervention in the past led to forever war, that means today any military intervention means forever war, and that's simply not true. That assumption leads to the big lie that military action should be avoided at all costs. That there's no justified use for the U.S. military. But this, of course, is not true. And it's a narrative that you hear from the political commentariat, but it's not a feeling that's reflected in the minds of the American people. If you look at a poll back from June 2025, 73% of Americans view Iran as a security threat. 73%. And that's, by the way, a 13-point boost just in the past 6 years. Just in the past 6 years. Listen, if President Trump can successfully keep boots off the ground, or most boots off the ground, and end this relatively soon, hopefully within the 4 to 6 weeks, like President Trump said, then President Trump will have done the following. He will have decimated the world's premier funder and supporter of terrorism, most crucially by blocking Iran's oil exports to those groups, Hezbollah, Hamas, the rest of them. This, of course, is directly in pursuit of America's interests because it establishes peace through strength and cutting off the lifeblood of these terrorist groups that seek to kill us. President Trump will also send a message to Iran's partners, Russia and China, because he will have disrupted their relations with Iran, as he did their relations with Venezuela. And in doing so, he will have reduced their global influence without a direct conflict with either Russia or China, thereby improving our position against two of our top strategic competitors around the globe without, again, taking either one on head on. This is how we need to be thinking about the military action in Iran. And we're going to bring in now Jason Buttrill. He's the head writer for Glenn Beck, or head researcher and writer for Glenn Beck. He's also a former DoD intel analyst, so he knows the inside baseball of these military operations. Jason, good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Liz. Appreciate it.
Okay, Jason, I want to address some of these questions that you've seen this divide on the right. Some people understand that President Trump, why President Trump attacked. Other people are very skeptical. We're all very skeptical of regime change and forever war, as we should be. But if you had to distill the answer to the question, why did Trump attack Iran, how would you answer that question?
I was just listening to you, and I think you're right on the money on multiple different points. I think that when you think about this conflict, there's the immediate reason why we needed to go and do this now, but there's also the much larger situation that the entire administration is thinking about here. And I just want to take, before we get down into the immediacy of why they did this now, I just want to take everyone back to a long time ago, 3 years, something like that. It feels like a long time ago, when the entire world was talking about how we were getting bogged down in a forever war with Russia as with proxies in Ukraine. The BRICS organization was all but taking over. It was almost every single week you were looking at a new BRICS member was getting added into their bloc. They were going so far to say publicly at their meetings that the world reserve currency as the dollar was a thing of the past. It was going away. We were on the back foot at every single point with this, and a conflict between us and China in Taiwan was considered immediate. In fact, they had a date set, a year set, and we're just a year off from that. This was going to happen. And our enemies, our adversaries, were very clearly taking multiple steps forward while we were stepping backwards. Every single administration had ideas on how to figure this out. You remember the Obama administration was like, let's hit the reset button with Russia. We'll figure this out. We want to pivot to Asia. We want to somehow figure out how to, contain China. None of them could figure it out. And their big foreign policy plan was to have this nuclear deal with Iran without even considering proxy groups that they were taking over the entire Middle East with, multiple different programs in Iran to produce long-range missiles. We'll get into that in a second, in the immediacy. And then opening up Iran to Belt and Road initiatives from China, a major strategic goal for China and the BRICS movement in general. All of this stuff was happening, and there was not a single thing being done about it. Now we have President Trump. He's talking about Panama. He's talking about Venezuela. He's talking about Cuba. He's talking about Greenland. Now we're looking at Iran. For people that don't know, China bought 90% of Iran's oil exports. 90%. Taken in whole, whether you when you knock out Iranian oil and you knock out Venezuelan oil going to China, China lost 20% of their entire oil exports. It
Whoa.
is absolutely insane. So going off of what you said, yes, we are dealing immediately with Iran, but this is part of a much larger strategy so that we're not taking a step backwards. We're not setting ourselves up for a real World War III like situation sparking off in theaters like Taiwan, places like that. We are doing more of a Reagan strategy where we're saying enough is enough. It stops here. We are getting to a point to where you will not be able to counter the United States of America because we are stopping everything you've been building over the past 10 plus years. Now, the immediate of why we decided to do this, you went into the meeting that happened. Apparently, the Iranians didn't go to kindergarten and learn certain phrases like you don't put all of your eggs in one basket. They said, screw that, and went ahead and put all those eggs in one basket. Now is the time to do it. I was predicting probably another week or so before this attack happened. But we've also
Still
now
pretty
heard
close.
we're pretty close. But we're now also hearing that in trying to rebuild their military capability back. I mean, when we attacked, what was that, a few months ago with Operation Midnight Hammer. Now they have been trying to rebuild up and get better than what they were. So they were reaching out to places like China. They were looking to get ship killer missiles that could challenge our fleet out in the Gulf. They were also trying to construct a intercontinental ballistic missile so they could directly target the United States. We've talked to multiple different sources on this, and apparently this was an actual very real threat that they were looking to do in the very near future. So they saw this as something that needs to happen now. But it not only solves the immediate problem of the security threat, but it also solves the much larger chessboard. And I'm telling you, Liz, when you talk about the historical nature of all of this, 15, 20, 50 years from now, they will be looking back and say, this is probably one of the greatest foreign policy executions of the entire history of our country. It is that consequential and that big.
It feels that big, even as there's this kind of bickering that's happening on X between like the isolation. There's like three factions, right? The isolationists and the neocons. And then I would consider myself like pragmatic America first. I want it to be directly in America's interests, but I can also see things from a strategic lens that it doesn't have to be, oh, there is a nuke on its way to the United States. Now it's okay to use the military. Like we want to prevent that. Talk to me about the terror threats. I mean, you and I were talking a little bit over the weekend and I was saying like, what's going to happen here? And you're like, well, I think Iran's conventional capacity for retaliation is pretty much neutralized or significantly neutralized. You know, the missiles they're firing is maybe the most significant thing. I'm not putting words in your mouth. That's my opinion. And then you and I were talking about unconventional retaliation, the sleeper cells that are in the United States. They're in Europe too. They're all around the world. Give us a rundown on what to expect. We obviously saw that shooting in Austin, Texas, that he seemed to be a lone wolf, but I kind of reject that label. I just mean he doesn't seem to have been directed directly by a terror leader, but he was obviously, I mean, he had a Quran in his car. He was wearing a t-shirt that said property of Allah. He reportedly his undershirt was an Iranian flag. This was someone clearly inspired by support of the Iranian Islamic regime. Is that what we're going to see? Is it going to be more sophisticated? Like, give us a rundown here.
So the asymmetrical attacks from Iran have always been what I fear the most. What's kind of crazy when you think about the conventional ways for Iran to resist us, I gave them, I think, a little bit too much credit. I cannot believe that I was just reading a report that we hit about 2,000 targets over the weekend and already achieved air superiority over the capital, Tehran, which is just nuts. If you look at the map on the areas that we hit inside Tehran, there's like an oval within Tehran that is considered, I was about to say the green zone, but it's basically a no-go zone. It's supposed to be one of the hardest targets to hit. That's not named Moscow and Beijing. It's supposed to be that hard. And we rendered that completely obsolete, all of their ways to resist us. Just nuts. I mean, it almost makes you think that the idea of forever war is a choice. And that's when you start looking at, the military industrial complex, the deep state, what they really have in mind when they enter into some of these forever wars. Because
It's
Donald Trump,
obviously a choice.
it's
Here's the
a
thing.
choice.
You and I talked about this the last time, and I think it's worth repeating. I am not sure that we will ever see a forever war again, even if there's a neocon president, God forbid, because the people of the United States, you and I and everyone else, understand now, wait a second, that's not necessary in any circumstance. That is a deliberate political decision using the men and women of the United States military to profit yourself for as long as you think people will tolerate it. I don't think people are going to tolerate that ever again.
Yeah, I sincerely hope not. But it sounds like the drain the swamp initiatives, at least on the surface here, if this is any kind of way to measure it, is largely actually helping. And we don't hear that much, and we don't see we don't give that enough credit. But it's absolutely helping it when it comes to the military industrial complex, because this is just wild to see. But when we talk about asymmetrical attacks, that's what I'm curious about myself the most.
Yeah.
One of them would be the Strait of Hormuz. That would be considered actually an asymmetrical attack, because yes, it is a military response from the Islamic regime on our military, but it's also designed to create a lot of fear, to create a lot of chaos, and get the entire world to mobilize together to have one common goal of, guys, I don't care what's going on in this conflict. Yeah. So that's the first thing that they will try to do.
You think they're going to do that?
But I think they definitely want to try that. The problem is they don't really have much to do it with. So the stage they're in right now, they're gaining air superiority. Might have full air superiority for all I know at this point. But then it shifts to every way that they can use to attack hard targets within that region. That's what we are trying to get rid of first. So we're hitting missile sites, we're hitting bunker sites, we're hitting the Navy. Donald Trump's been talking about how we're taking out their Navy. All those different ways. That is the current priority number one. The second one is asymmetrical attacks in places like what you were talking about with terrorism. So you and I have spoken about what they've been building in South America. That's one of the reasons why Venezuela was so important, because they have been training terrorists, sending them back to Iran and then back into South America with the full intent of getting them across the border. Now, we know that that's what they've been trying to do. Yeah. It's very, very, I think, telling as far as we haven't seen any of that. So that Austin shooting, I think, is comparable, and it's awful. It's awful to say this, and the attack was awful, but it's actually small potatoes, compared to what they would plan to do.
Yeah, the word that I've been using is unsophisticated, because I don't want to downplay it, because it was deadly and it was horrific, but it seemed to be inspired by versus directed by, which I think lowers it on the it's obviously different to walk into a bar and open fire, as horrific as that is, than to down an airliner, right? Like it requires different levels of sophistication.
Right, and it's similar. It's similar to guerrilla warfare, as it would be designed to inflict as many casualties as possible on the American public, to where the entire country would say, you don't have our support with this anymore. You must stop what you're doing. Now think about that. I'm not going to go in specifically in the attacks that we have studied and looked at, because I don't want to give anybody any ideas. But that's what they'd be expecting. I know. Well, I'm pretty sure that the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, CIA, all the law enforcement agencies involved have had a very, very busy past couple of months. I'm sure they've been looped in on this, and their goal has been to make sure that is stopped before anything even happens. So I have some comfort in that, but I would tell the people, don't be scared, but be prepared and be vigilant, as we move through this, because that is a very real possibility.
Yeah, I think that was a question that I got and I saw a lot over the weekend. Like, yeah, we do expect to see retaliation, but like, what is this going to look like? Like, is this going to be a large-scale terror attack against the United States? Is this going to be lone wolf attacks? Is this going to be sort of this head on a swivel for a certain amount of time? Like, if they were going to activate sleeper cells, when would that happen? And that I would defer to you. I mean, is that something that would happen immediately? Is that something that would happen in a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months? Like, when would you expect that, should that happen?
I wouldn't expect that now, because that capability has been built up probably over years. And so they're not going to want to spoil that if they do have assets like that in place. This would be more when the regime is on, when they look at it and say we are days away from falling, something like that. So I would look for something like that. This is just what I'm
Mm.
expecting on it. Would be the closer they get to the later phases within the operation. So we are right now in a phase one portion of the operation, which is take out air defense, which we can talk about that. That's in itself an insane story. Their air defense capability or non-capability. Take out, gain air superiority of the country, take out their ways of hitting us, other countries, or our bases in theater, and then stage two would be striking security services so that the people can go out and actually be the boots on the ground, which is interesting because that's exactly what the Crown Prince told my boss, Glenn, on air. He said, we are the boots on the ground. We don't need American boots on the ground. If you start this, we'll take it from there. So that's where this is leading to. So I see that happening once they do get through phase one. They start striking the security services for phase two to make sure that the protesters will be safer so that they can actually get out in the streets. And you can see them already. You saw
Yeah.
them over the weekend already kind of coming out and celebrating. It's pretty
I mean,
wild.
honestly, my reaction to seeing some of those videos is the incredible amount of courage that it takes for the Iranian people to go outside after the regime had been slaughtering. I mean, tens of thousands have been murdered by the Iranian regime, and they still go outside. That is courage beyond my capacity to express my admiration for. That is like courage in the highest virtue. That is incredible to me. Regime change, though, there's a lot of skepticism, and I'm included in this group. I mean, I have confidence in President Trump more so than it seems than some people, because not because I have blind faith in somebody, but because I think past actions are the best predictor of future behavior. And President Trump has shown us that he's against forever war. It's not just his words. How many times has he used military force this year and his entire presidency? And he's never gotten us into a forever war. He's gone in, completed his objective, and gotten out. And so why would that suddenly change now? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And he's surrounded by people who share his philosophy. That being said, the United States has a little bit of an iffy history with regime change in the Middle East. Do you see this going differently than it has in the past? Like, how do you prevent bad actors from taking over the country? Is this something that you think Trump knows who he wants to install and he just hasn't let on yet because it's not the right moment? Or what do you foresee with that?
It's a really good question because we know that the Trump administration has learned from past mistakes. Now, the Forever War group in Venezuela would have said, "You got the president. Now just move in, force this opposition leader in, and we're all good. We might have to stick around and do some security, but whatever. We got it done." They went another way. They left Maduro's number two in charge because they know that even in an oppressive regime, you still have hundreds of thousands of people that actually support that regime. So what do you do with all those people? Iran is the exact same way. You'll still see rallies. I saw some videos this weekend where there were a lot of people chanting, crying for the supreme leader and chanting for the regime. That's going to happen. So I think they've learned their lesson. I think that there is a plan that gets us away from the mistakes of the past. But Liz, there are so many ways this could go sideways. I mean, just for instance, so you think about there's hundreds of thousands of people that probably support within Iran support the regime. You also have radicals that are in the IRGC that are not just there for a paycheck. They actually believe in Twelver Shi'ism. They actually believe in the cause. Where are they going to go? One of the first combat missions that I was a part of right after 9/11 in Afghanistan, I was with the first conventional unit that went in. Some of our first combat missions were to set up blocking positions around Kabul to catch the Taliban as they were coming out, because we didn't want them to get out and then turn back around, mount another offense, and come back against us. Well, I would be very surprised if there's not some kind of special operations force that would be involved in monitoring where some of these IRGC people will go if we start getting towards full collapse of the government. I think where I would be watching as an intel analyst, if I was still working there, I'd be looking at that Iraqi border, because there are tons of Shiite militias and a huge support base in Iraq. If you can further connect the dots, Nouri al-Maliki is now trying to get back into politics in Iraq and lead the country again. and he's just an Iranian Shiite stooge. So it's very interesting that he's just now entering politics right at this moment to become basically the guy that handed Iraq over to Iran. This is a very big red flag. So all the people that are now leaving, all the radicals, if they do start leaving with collapse, they've got a support base already built into Iraq.
Yeah.
Iraq could be the next whack-a-mole coming back again, and that would it's almost never ending in the Middle East. It really is.
Well, I think it's also just intellectually honest to say, listen, we trust the president on this. There was certainly, it's in America's interest to wage this attack, but there's also a lot of things like that can still go wrong, and we need to be very vigilant to guard against that. I know you have to go. You have a very hard out. We really appreciate your analysis. I'm sure we'll talk about this at length in the days and weeks to come, because even if President Trump's estimate is right, even if this is 4 to 6 weeks, that's a lot that's going to happen in the space of the next month. So thanks for being here. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Liz. Bye.
Our movement is gaining ground. People around us are waking up. The mainstream media leftist narrative is cracking. At BlazeTV, we've built a home for some of the strongest, smartest voices in conservative media. When you subscribe to BlazeTV, you're not just watching content, you're supporting a movement. You're backing creators who think for themselves. It's everything that the networks won't show you, delivered on your terms, on any device, anytime. And it starts at just $8 a month. BlazeTV.com/Liz, promo code Liz.